A missing persons report has been filed as local teacher Mr. Nyson is nowhere to be found in a time where his students are in desperate need of e-learning. This leaves us to question, was he kidnapped? Will he return? Will there be a substitute teacher? We have reporters out in the field at his last known whereabouts. I'm going to send it over to our correspondent, Patrick Starr. Patrick, do you have any updates on this? Thank you, Gary. This was Mr. Nyson's last known whereabouts. As you can see here, it looks like he was all set up for the day, Wednesday, May 13th. But where is he? If he's all set up, what heinous crime could have happened that he is not here? Oh, this just in. We have news from Sandy that we might have whereabouts on him. So I'm going to send it over to Sandy.
Thanks, Patrick. Sandy here. As you can hear, there is music playing, so we ran as fast as we could to cover to see if Mr. Nyson could be found here, but he is not here. Back to you, Gary.
Thanks, Sandy Cheeks. I'm going to send it over to Pearl. We have new information about his whereabouts. Pearl?
Thanks, Gary. I'm pretty sure I know where he's at. I'm on my way there now. Oh, I found him! Doesn't he know it's time for e-learning? He's out planting sweet corn. Some say that he is outstanding in his field. It's time for e-learning.
Oh, we better hurry. I got to get inside. We got a lot of math to learn today. Let's go.
Come on. Let's go.
Wednesday, everybody. Sorry about that. I kind of lost track of time. I tried to never have a sub. I was just out there trying to get the sweet corn. I figure if I grow enough sweet corn, then I'll be able to play the piano by ear. But no, seriously, trying to get the sweet corn in before it rains tonight. It's supposed to be nice weather. Finally, the cold maybe will go away. But there's a lot of great jokes about sweet corn and growing corn. Some are rather corny and some are rather amazing. But, I have a hard time remembering jokes. I'm kind of like that worm in a cornfield. They just go in one ear and out the other. And so, hey, make sure you take attendance for this Wednesday morning. Don't forget. And we're ready to start the e-learning for today. Algebra today. I got to remember to take my hat off. There's no hats in school. And so, but this is Math Counts Week. If you're involved in that, the online state competition. You got to register. I know some of you already did. And you can create your teams. You have the chance of winning free graphing calculators. And it's not based on your score, just doing it. That's exciting. Texas Instruments is donating them. And so you got a good chance. And so, but today we're going to shift gears. We're done with inequalities. Normally we'd have a review game and a test and conclude the unit. But these days, we are just going to start quadratic equations. And so today should be a nice, easy day, the first section in each chapter. So this is Notes 125, and it's page 563, 2 to 48 even. Copy the problem, show your steps, show your answer. And so today, on that's pre-algebra's notes. And so what we have for us today is we're going to begin solving quadratics. And then during these next week, we are going to go all the way from this to completing the square to solving the quadratic formula. And so this is Notes 125. And the technique we're going to use today is normally we would set it equal to 0. But we could just square root both sides if you have a perfect square. And so always remember, if you have a perfect square, right, perfect square on a side, you could square root it. But there is a danger in doing this, and that's point 2. Because if you just square root this and say, well, I get 3y equals 11, and you divide by 3, you will think that your only answer is 11/3. And that would not be correct. Because there is another answer other than 11/3. Logan? Would it be negative 11/3? Yes. Now, how did we know that? Well, I'm going to erase. You don't necessarily have to erase. But remember how we used to solve quadratics. We would do what? Cody? Yeah, we would set them equal to 0. And be 9y squared minus 121 equals 0. And then what would we do, Judah? Nice job finishing the entire assignment last time. Great job. Keep it up. And so this would then factor Judah into what? Yeah, 3y plus 11 and 3y minus 11. That's how Logan knew there were two answers. Well, does that mean we have to factor all these tonight? Well, there's a couple that it will say to factor. But we want to try this new technique of square rooting both sides, and that's a plus or minus 11/3. And we can use the new technique if we go back to the old one here, and you square root both sides. Just remember when you do it, you want the answer to be plus or minus 11. And yeah, this could be plus or minus 3, but then you got 3y, or you just solve it for the y squared, and then you divide by 3. And so then that would give you your plus or minus 11/3. Now it's kind of hard for me to write this with the mouse, but you should make those braces, like make an S, then make a Z. And if you focus on that, make a Z, then make an S. Your braces don't look too bad. Even with a mouse, they don't look too bad. Okay? So we don't want you to FOIL this out. We don't want you to set it equal to 0. Hey, I'm trying to teach. What are you thinking? Cats have a mind of their own. And you solve it, but you can take the square root of both sides. And don't square root just one side there. Square root both sides. And so if I square root both sides, just remember, this side would be x minus 3. But then this side is not 10, because if you just do 10 and add 3, you're only going to get one answer, a 13. This side is two answers, plus or minus 10. And then add 3 to both sides, and you would get 3 plus or minus 10. And don't you dare circle that. You need to tell me what 3 plus 10 is. Lauren, 13. But then, Lauren, what's 3 minus 10? Yeah, negative 7. And if we did FOIL it out into x squared minus 6x plus 9, and we did subtract 100 and get 81, and then we did, or 91, and then we did FOIL it, you'd get 13 and 7. And so you would get that, but we want to try the new technique. But anytime we learn anything new, we always have to remember that when you take the square root of both sides, you need to remember to do the plus or minus on the side to get your two roots, to get your two answers. Now, if I tried to set this equal to 0 and factor it, it'd be a squared plus 169 equals 0, and we would say, well, we can't factor it. Ooh, not in real numbers. But so we don't want to do that. So what we want to do is we want to subtract 25 from each side. And when you do that, you're solving for a perfect square. It's a squared. And that would equal negative 169. And then we square root both sides. But when you do that, you want plus or minus. And what is the square root of negative 169? In the book, the one reason I gave you evens tonight is so some of you don't just look them up and go, well, no solution, no solution. Because we know there is a solution. Remember, I can show you the world, shining, shimmering, splendid. Tell me, princess, when did you last let your brain decide, or whatever it is. And so, remember, this answer would be what, Ilya? Yeah, it'd be 13i. It'd be imaginary. Because if the negative's under the square root sign, it's an I. And we want you to write the imaginary answers throughout this entire chapter because you can handle the truth. And so we want you to be able to do that. Plus or minus 13i. Now, number 4, as they get tougher through the homework. X squared minus 10x plus 25. What would that factor into? See, if I subtract 40 and get x squared minus 10x, we're going to begin solving ones that we can't solve another way. Those first ones you could solve different ways. But this one you'd be like, I can't solve this. It doesn't factor. I'm stuck. But see, the new technique is if I can get this side to be a perfect square, right here, something squared, well, what does it factor into? Elizabeth? Yeah, it'd factor into x minus 5 times x minus 5. So that's just x minus 5 quantity squared. And that equals 40. And then what would be the new step, Jacob? Yeah, we're going to square root both sides. But what do we have to remember? It's going to be plus or minus the square root of 40. There are two solutions. And this, the square root and the squared just cancel, and you get x minus 5. Well, on this one, you add 5 to both sides, and you get 5 plus or minus. What does the square root of 40 simplify to? Rosie? What perfect square goes into 40? Yeah, 4 times 10. So that would be, Rosie, yeah, 2 square root 10. Now you begin to see the answers written like this, and this is the two answers. And you do not have to write these separately. You don't have to write 5 plus 2 square root 10, and then 5 minus 2 square root 10. Okay? But if the book would want the decimal answer, let me get my trusty rusty calculator, you can type in, you don't even have to type it in simplified. But see, you can type in 5 plus 2 square root 10. Just type it all in and hit equals, and then round it to whatever they say to, 11.32. And then you can just arrow up. I can't do this upside down. And then it would be 5 minus. And you can just arrow up. Nah. Here we go. You can arrow up and just change the plus to a minus. 5 minus 2 square root 10. And then write negative 1.32. And so it's good practice to be able to see if you can type that in and actually get the decimal values, which are no longer the exact values because you'd round them off. But then for number 5, let's take a look and see what we have for number 5. It's number 5 right here. Maybe I'll move myself over here. And so you don't want to square root right away. And why wouldn't you want to do that? Joe? Yeah, because you'd have the square root of 7, and that's not a perfect square. And so you don't want to do that. You want to isolate the perfect square. And so on this one, the first thing you want to do is divide by 7. And of course, in the old days, we'd FOIL all this out, x squared plus 16x plus 64. And then we'd add 28 to both sides. Or actually, we'd be adding a 4 to both sides because we divided by 7. But see, on this one, we have a perfect square on each side. Or we have a perfect square that has the x term, and so we want to square root both sides. But when you do that, what do you have to remember to do, Aiden? Yeah, this is going to be plus or minus 2i. Now we start getting imaginary solutions, irrational solutions, all these things that don't factor. And this side would be x plus 8. Well, then how would we finish solving that? If they add 8, what would we do, Jordan? Yeah, subtract 8. Well, you don't have to type this one in your calculator because you can't type an imaginary in the calculator. So normally we write the real part first. And so it'd be negative 8. Many people would write these separately. Plus 2i, comma, negative 8 minus 2i. But it's okay if you just write negative 8 plus or minus 2i. And yes, we can write these braces, which takes up half the time of the video just for me to do that. To do the little squiggles. But do not write no solution. Okay? Now, I did have somebody the other day ask me, Mr. Nice, and I have a cousin, they're in college, and they're taking like college algebra. Is that like the same class I'm taking? Well, not exactly, because it is college, so it is a little bit tougher. And we're not going to necessarily finish these, but I want to show you how knowledge of today's can apply to, like, if we're in college algebra, what we would be doing. You would do a substitution like this, x to the 4th and x squared. We would let y equal x squared. And then we would solve it. And see, it'd be 3y squared plus 10y minus 8 to equal 0. And then you would solve this one instead of that one. On this, you would let y equals 1 over x minus 3. And this problem would then be 8y squared minus 2y, and then we could subtract the 1 to equal 0. And see, we would solve this. I'll solve this one. This would be 4y and 2y. And these would both be 1s. And to get a minus there, you'd get minus there and plus there. And that would equal 0. And see, your solutions for y would be negative 1/4 and 1/2. And then you would set what you substitute instead of y equals negative 1/4. You would let 1 over x minus 3 be negative 1/4. And then you would solve that. And then you would get 1 over x minus 3 equals 1/2, and you'd solve that. But that is not on tonight's homework. And same thing here. You could let, or you know, when you get to calculus and pre-calculus, they call it a u substitution. We could have used y. They always use u. And so you could say that x would equal u squared. And so then this would be 2u squared minus 5u plus 3 equals 0. And then you would factor this and figure out what u is. But then you would square it to figure out what x is. And so I just wanted to throw that in because there is a lot more algebra that we never cover, that you could be doing algebra for a long, long time and always new things. But once the ideas are in your head, you're good to go, okay? So, but the top part of the notes is what your homework's over, the plus or minus and trying to solve that. And so we're going to get started with those on the homework. And so let's see what we have in store. Assignment, it's page 563, and then 2 to 48 even, and assignment 125. And so we're doing the evens, but do not follow the instructions. It says express irrational solutions in simplest radical form, so you don't have to worry about the decimals. But I do want you to write the imaginary, the complex number answers. Do not write no solution. Don't. So on this first one, yes, Colin, you could do it in your head. The quantity y minus 7 squared equals 0. Well, y equals 7. Well, that's right, because if you square rooted both sides, can you really do a plus or minus 0? Plus or minus 0 would just be 0. And so, yeah, it'd be plus or minus 0, and then you just add 7. So you get 7. But number 4, what would you do on this one, Danielle? Yeah, when you square root both sides, underneath, Danielle, remember, not sideways, but underneath, we show the steps. And so this would be A, and then it would be plus or minus 3i. And so don't forget the plus or minus. Now in this one, you could square root both sides, but I would divide by 6 first. And then take the square root, and then the plus or minus. This one, you could factor this, but move the 48 over. And then square root both sides. And remember, remember the plus or minus. Always remember the plus or minus. Boy, the sun shines bright on my old Kentucky home. And so we have that. And so as you're going through the first ones, those are pretty much like the notes. But then as we get down to the B section, you want to factor the 28 first. You want to make this y minus 9 quantity squared. And then equals, and then square root both sides, and be plus or minus 12. And then don't do 9 plus 12, 9 minus 12. Actually, tell me what 9 plus 12 is, and tell me what 9 minus 12 is. On this problem, you could multiply both sides by 64 and get rid of your fractions. You know, they're just trying to see if you can deal with all this crazy stuff. And then solve it for the t squared. And then square root both sides. And then plus or minus. 32, you could multiply both sides by 6. And that would get rid of all your fractions. 34, you could multiply by 100. Or you could just subtract 2. And then divide by the 4.9. And that should take care of it too. 36, you can divide by 5. And so on 36, whoa, I didn't mean to write that. You get t plus 2 quantity squared when you divide by minus square root 3 over 5. And then when you move the 2 over, you would get negative 2 plus or minus, but see, the negative 2 isn't in a fraction. If you wanted to make it a fraction, that's why we just did that chapter, and you wanted to put the whole thing over 5, what would the negative 2 become, Ethan? Yeah, it'd be a negative 10. And that's the way you would see the book write it. You would see the whole thing written over a 5. And so you'd see negative 10 plus or minus square root 3 all over 5. Okay, 40. Notice these, it says, because it's going to be a y squared minus 4, which can factor into y plus 2 times y minus 2, and your answer is going to be 0, 2, and negative 2. Listen to that on 2 times speed and see how fast we can talk. But we want you to factor on 40, 42, and 44, and we want you to set these equal to 0. And then we want you to pull something out first, okay? And then on 46, divide by 3 first. Then square root both sides, then add 2 and divide by 5. And then on 48, which I can't see because I'm hiding it. Whoa, I got writing. I went in between the writing and the page. And then on 48, what you want to do, so first thing you're going to do is subtract 5. Then you're going to divide by 2. And then you're going to square root both sides. And then you're going to add 2 and divide by 7. And plus or minus, okay? So we look forward to seeing your homework. Remember, Pi Time today, that online state competition. Some of you were official competitors. And so you can create your own teams. If you need my help setting any of it up, helping you with an AOPS account, I will help you with that. Just let me know. And remember, if you email me stuff and send me questions during the 9 to 3 time, I will answer you right away unless I'm eating lunch. If you send me stuff at midnight, then I play catch up trying to get the other stuff because I answer the other people first. And so try to send me stuff during the day. And we miss all you guys. Let me know if you have questions. And we're starting quadratics. Okay, bye-bye.